I remember this one band that said on its biography that it would only play 1 gig a year and that none of its songs would be simple songs, by which they meant that all of their songs would be played in complex time signatures. The result, as you would probably expect, was a bunch of unmemorable songs and probably that 1 gig only. Because the easiest thing in music is to write a complex song. Now, many music aficionados would say that a complex song has less chance of success in the mainstream, since the less developed or untrained musical ear would not be able to comprehend such a creation. But of course they're ignoring bands like Queen and Pink Floyd, and of course that whole genre called classical music, liked by a bunch of people, which together have contributed some of the most complex pieces of music ever. And in fact, one could easily claim that Bohemian Rhapsody is the most popular complex piece of music ever created. And even an ear that's not professionally trained in music is going to notice a note that's off key or an inappropriate change of tempo. They might not be able to articulate it that way, they just know that they'd heard something bizarre which was not easy to digest. Which is why the trick is creating complex music that's actually pleasant to hear. And these are things that usually happen naturally in order to solve various songwriting problems, or even trying to weld together a number of parts written separately into one song, and not out of a conscious decision. Because the second easiest thing in music is to say about a piece of music that it isn't complex enough. And that's usually because the speaker wouldn't know complex music if it tagged him in his Instagram reel, but also because it's just a general and condescending statement to make. So in this sequence, I'm out to improve the quality of condescension and pomposity in Musical Snobbery 101, or What Makes Music Complex. The most ear-pleasing way to make a complex piece of pop music is to create a sophisticated melody. Most melodies we hear in pop music are usually comprised of a fairly limited number of notes, a step or half a step between each other, so intervals of 1 note or half a note. Play a pop song melody on the piano and count the notes, and you're usually going to find only 4 or 5. In a rap song, probably even fewer. The more sophisticated the melody, the more notes in the song, and the larger the jumps between each note in the melody. So larger jumps from one note in the melody to the next. Besides nearly every Beatles song ever. Come on, you didn't really think a video about complex music wasn't going to be talking about the Beatles. An excellent example is Simon & Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, which Paul Simon wrote especially insane vocal range. But I also have to specifically mention the Beatles' I Will, which touches on every single note of the scale. Complex musical changes in songs, such as extreme changes in key or in tempo, are usually the result of a solution to various songwriting problems, or trying to weld a number of parts written separately into one song. An excellent example of extreme changes like that is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which literally changes key between verse, pre-chorus, and chorus, and then back. That's part of the reason Ringo's 3-snare pattern is there. But even more genius is their half-step modulation in And I Love Her. Seriously, if you want to challenge yourself, see if you can spot that one. Now please note that I'm not talking about the very common 2-step modulation which many songs feature in an attempt to try to get their song some unearned zip. There actually used to be a whole website devoted to listing all of the songs which rely on this as a crutch. A complex song would in this case be spotted by returning to the original key, or at least not staying on the modulation for the remainder of the song, and also by avoiding the simple 1-step modulation. A large number of complex pop songs are comprised of an exceptionally large number of parts. While a pop song is usually going to consist of 3 parts, the complex song might feature many more parts which dramatically alter the mood of the song. An obvious example is, of course, Bohemian Rhapsody, which runs the gamut of emotions as well as, of course, Stairway to Heaven. But how about I Am the Walrus? In fact, the Beatles made a career out of 3-part songs, but that's a subject for a different post. And of course, you can write relatively simple songs like Eleanor Rigby, and then arrange them in a way which makes them sound new and fresh to the ear, which is really what we're always after, both as artists and as listeners. A rock song in which the musical backing is entirely inspired by classical compositions and sounds, in which famously none of the Beatles played a musical instrument on, is obviously a perfect example. The result is a song that still sounds fresh today, like so many of their tracks, which is exactly what makes them classic. Because the more complex the song, the more times we can hear it without getting tired of it, which is why nearly every song mentioned here is one of the all-time greatest classics. Because listeners do like being challenged by something they might not necessarily be used to. And they can also spot when someone went out of his way to write something complex. And they also know, despite not necessarily being able to articulate it, that the easiest thing in music is to write a complex song. Now, writing a complex song that's fun to listen to, that's a lot more complex.
Just never mind, send someone else to thank